Resuming debate, the honourable member for Ottawa West Nepean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my pleasure today to rise to contribute to the debate on pay equity in Canada. I thank the honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith for bringing this important issue to the floor of this House. In 2016, it is not acceptable that women in Canada are still earning 23% less than men. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had the honour of meeting with a group of grade 5 students from Woodruff Public School in my riding of Ottawa West Nepean who were here touring Parliament. And the students, I told them I was giving a speech later in the day, and they asked me, what's the topic of your speech? And I said to them, I'm talking about pay equity. And I explained to them that what that means is that men and women who are doing similar jobs should get similar pay. And to these students, this was something that should be self-evident. When I told them that women are only making 73 cents for every dollar that men make in Canada, the students were terribly disappointed, and they applauded me for speaking on this in this House today. And I think this is an issue that even young children can understand because it's an issue of basic fairness. The face of poverty in Canada is female. 35% of single mothers are living below the poverty line, compared to 17% for single dads. 71% of low-income seniors are women, a number that is even worse for senior women who are living alone. Women are more likely than men to be working in minimum wage jobs, working part-time, or doing shift work. In Ontario, 58% of minimum wage earners are women. Women in Canada today earn just 67 cents for every dollar earned by men. I've heard some opponents say that women make different life choices, including taking time off for caregiving or working fewer hours, which they say accounts for this discrepancy. However, even when comparing people who are working full-time, full year in similar jobs, women are still earning only 73 cents on the dollar. Even though women are now more educated than ever before, the gap continues. In fact, more women today between the ages of 25 and 34 have bachelor's, master's, and medical degrees than men. So the gap is not because women are less educated or less qualified. In Canada, this wage gap exists across all occupations, from the service industry to scientists to management. When factoring in Aboriginal women, visible minorities, new immigrant women, women living with disabilities, and transgender, the wage gap is even greater. This is a glaring example of gender discrimination that must be dealt with. Mr. Speaker, we live in a society where we tell our children that they can do anything and be anything. We tell boys and girls that if they study hard and if they work hard, they will succeed. And yet, the deck is stacked from the beginning. Our daughters will not be as valued in the workplace as our sons, even if they have the same marks, the same educational levels, work just as hard, and are equally skilled. This is not an issue that is about numbers. It is about fairness and about human rights. I would like to illustrate this with a real-life example of a couple that I know. I'll call them Jennifer and Steve. They went to university together. Jennifer completed her master's degree with first-class honors and then went on to work in a low-paying service job to help put Steve through his master's degree. She then went back to school to get more professional qualifications and went on to work in a predominantly female profession, making $35,000 a year. Steve found a position immediately after graduation in a predominantly male profession. He was making $75,000 a year. After a few years, they decided to have a baby. Even though Jennifer wanted to keep working, the cost of childcare was almost as much as her salary. Because Steve earned more, they made the decision that Jennifer would stay home until the child began school. That child is now 9 years old, and Jennifer is making less than $20,000 a year working part-time, while Steve is making almost 6 figures. You might say that this is not an example of pay equity because Jennifer and Steve are not working in the same fields. But her initial job required more education and had a greater level of responsibility than Steve's entry-level post. Had they been making the same salaries when they had their baby, she may have stayed in the labor force, and the family might have made different choices. Pay equity is not just about two people doing the same job. It is about a cycle of discrimination that limits opportunities for half the population. Canada is also lagging behind internationally when it comes to equal pay for work of equal value. According to the World Economic Forum, Canada ranks 80th out of 145 countries in the Wage Equality Survey indicator. Pay equity is a fundamental human right that is enshrined in international treaties as well as Canadian human rights frameworks. The UN International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights includes fair wages and equal remuneration for work of equal value. CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, refers to women's right to equal remuneration and equal treatment in respect to work of equal value. Canada is also signatory to the International Labour Organization's Convention 100 on equal remuneration. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 15, calls on equality of all citizens. And Section 11 of the Canadian Human Rights Act specifically refers to equal pay for work of equal value. These rights were undermined in 2009 with the introduction of Bill C-10, the Omnibus Budget Bill, that replaced the term pay equity with equitable compensation, moved responsibility for pay equity from the Canadian Human Rights Commission to the Public Service Labour Relations Board, which had no mandate for protecting human rights, fined unions for assisting with a complaint, and combined pay equity with collective bargaining. This treated pay equity as a benefit that could be bargained away as opposed to a fundamental right. It also goes against the recommendations of the 2004 Pay Equity Task Force. This 2004 task force called for standalone, proactive pay equity legislation, which would include a commitment to pay equity as a human right, that it apply equally to unionized and non-unionized workplaces, and that it include oversight agencies and an independent adjudicative body. The task force recommendations include a pay equity commission that could receive complaints, issue compliance orders, summon documents, and conduct audits. It also recommends a pay equity hearings tribunal. Several provinces already have similar mechanisms that have resulted in decreasing the wage gap. I am very proud, Mr. Speaker, to have a number of public servants in my riding of Ottawa West Nepean. The gender wage gap is a little bit less in the public service. It's about 9%, but this is still not enough. And I'm very pleased that the Prime Minister, in an interview with Up for Debate with the Alliance for Women's Rights, committed to ending the wage gap in the federal public service. We will begin with consultations with unions, stakeholders, and public servants themselves on this. Despite the work done over a decade ago on this task force, a young woman graduating from university today in Canada will still earn about $8,000 less than her male classmates in her first job, and will continue to earn less throughout her career, despite the fact that she may be working in a job that requires the same qualifications and is similar in demands and level of expertise. By the time she is in her 50s, she will be earning almost $23,000 less, and she will be far more likely to retire into poverty. By continuing to allow this without acting, we are doing a disservice to women throughout Canada, but especially to those bright and aspiring young graduates entering the labour force who deserve an equal chance to succeed. At the current rate of increase, women will achieve full gender equality only in the year 2240. And this is not just about human rights. Studies show there are economic benefits to pay equity. According to several studies, gender equality in the labour force could significantly increase GDP. Pay equity could also help to reduce poverty. A U.S. study found that if single working mothers were paid as much as their male counterparts, their poverty levels would be cut in half. Pay equity can also benefit men who are working in predominantly female professions. They would be eligible for the same pay equity adjustments as women in their employment class. Mr. Speaker, we cannot afford to do nothing. Pay equity is a fundamental right, and we owe it to Canadians to take action. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions et commentaires. Questions and comments. La députée de Trois-Rivières.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I listened very carefully to my colleague's speech. And I, too, share the same passion for students. The generations to come find this matter to be discriminatory. They feel it's ridiculous that it hasn't been resolved yet in 2016. In the opinion of the member, is it also discriminatory to not have an opportunity to use all resources available so a woman can claim her rights under the Act, under the Conservatives Act of 2009, which deprives women of these rights, if they are unionized, for example, to turn to the union to have representation?
West Nepean.
Mr. Speaker, this is one of the things that I have mentioned in the speech, and I think it was very unfair that unions were not able to represent people under the 2009 law. I believe that pay equity is something that if it's an individual person who has to go forward as a particular case, that doesn't address the problem, because in many cases this is something that is a collective issue. And so we need to have mechanisms, particularly human rights mechanisms, through which women can actually come forward and be represented. But I also think it's very important to recognize that this needs to apply to non-unionized workplaces as well, because pay equity needs to be across the board. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from Ottawa, West Nepean, for her remarks, and also for her years of work and service on human rights and women's equality. When she was speaking about the current situation of the absence of adequate mechanisms to ensure pay equity, she called that a disservice to women across Canada. And I'm thinking about the Canada's role in terms of respect or influence on the world stage. And so I'd like to ask the member, what impacts might it have on Canada's relationship with the other nations that we partner with in so many ways once we reduce or eliminate these gaps and introduce an effective pay equity approach?
Honourable Member for Ottawa West Nepean.
I thank the Honourable Member for her question. And it is true that in many areas, Canada is a leader in the world on gender and on equality. However, this particular area is one where Canada is falling behind. Out of 34 countries in the OECD, there are 7 that are only doing worse than us. So we're number 29 in the OECD. And these are amongst developed countries. And there's no reason for Canada to be lagging in this area. We have women who are attaining higher education levels more than ever before. And so there's no reason that women wouldn't also be attaining pay equity. There are countries, particularly the Nordic countries, who have exceptional models that we could be looking at. And hopefully, in the near future, Canada would once again become a leader in the world on this issue.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Foothills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from Ottawa West Nepean for her speech. It's quite clear that she's very passionate about this issue, and that's great to see. I think all of us in this place would agree this is a very important issue for all of us to discuss. I had an opportunity to be a member of the Status of Women Committee during my time here. It was one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. But we did a lot of great work as part of that committee. And I'm wondering if the member can explain to me why she feels it's important to start up another very expensive, time-consuming committee when we already have one in place that could very well deal with this issue. It has a great track record. That is what it is established for. Why can we not? Why do we have to start a whole other piece of bureaucracy? Why can it not just be a purview of the Status of Women Committee?
The Honourable Member for Ottawa West Nepean.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased that we have unanimity in this House on this very important issue. And I agree with the honourable member that we should not reinvent the wheel. There has been tremendous work done in this place on the issue of pay equity. There have been motions that have come before. I'm a member of the Status of Women Committee, and this was, in fact, one of the issues that I, as a member of Parliament, was hoping also to work on, and I do plan to work on. I think that the motion before us talks about a special committee. I think the most important thing is that this is something that is given priority and is studied. Whether it's a special committee, whether it's the Status of Women Committee, I think that this is something where we all have an opportunity, as all members of Parliament, to work together so that those young children that are coming in the future with their school groups don't have to learn that it's 73 cents to the dollar, that in the future we will have a parity when it comes to wages in Canada. Thank you.
Now, to please the debate.